In this video, I'm gonna show you 3 tools that you may not be using yet, and if you use them, they can help you design, I think, 10 times faster for After Effects. For this example, let's pretend we're doing a simple social media graphic that's gonna need some animation, and we have no design. All we have is our client's logo. The first tool I wanna talk about is Figma. This is the Figma interface, and if you haven't used it before, you can think of Figma sort of like Adobe Illustrator. That's the closest analog to it. It's a mostly vector-based design tool. And Figma is typically used in the world of UX and UI design, but I think motion designers should be using it more. Let me show you why. So this is a Figma project, and Figma is totally cloud-based. So if I work with Kramer Farms often, I can just keep updating this project, and any computer I open it up on will have all of my assets here. So this is the logo that I have from the client. This is just a vector element. And now what I need to do is create a square social media shaped graphic that I can bring into After Effects to animate. So the first thing I'm gonna do is set up a second artboard. I'm just gonna click and drag a frame like this, and then I'm gonna come over here and make sure that my dimensions are 1080 by 1080. Now for this example, we're gonna be creating a fall social media graphic for Kramer Farms. So let's make sure we're naming things correctly. So I'll just double click frame 1 and I'll call this fall design. Now we need some elements. Now if I have the time, I always prefer to design things from scratch. But in this case, and as you know, in a lot of cases, you just gotta get it done quick, all right? So I'm gonna show you the second tool now, which is gonna help you do that. Before I do that, I wanna remind you of something super important. When you hit that subscribe button, it fills my heart with glee. So please do that. All right, tool number 2, designstripe. Now, designstripe is one of my favorite new design helpers. Let me show you why. It's essentially a stock illustration website, but it's got some superpowers. So it's really nicely organized, first of all. It's organized by style, and then you can look for fully blown out scenes, or you can search for individual objects, and all of these are vector-based, so you can scale them up to any size you need. And I encourage you to go to the site and check out all of the different styles. There's some really cool ones and really handy ones too. You know, something like Hanson Modern, it's really cool and detailed and beautiful. It may not be appropriate for every project, but something like Cheerful, this is just bread and butter motion design all day long here. Now let me show you why I really love this tool. I'm just gonna go to the search bar and type in fall. And designstripe is gonna show me a whole bunch of scenes that have been tagged as being fall-like. If I wanted to, I could scroll back up to the top and just look at individual objects, and I could download those and I could arrange a scene using exactly the pieces I want. But a lot of times I find it's easier to find some scene that works fairly well and just modify it. And right here, I'm digging this one. Now notice as I hover my mouse over it, things start to change. Colors change, objects change. This is where the magic of designstripe comes in. I'm gonna click on this, but instead of clicking download, I'm gonna click customize. Now I wanna point out, designstripe is a paid tool to be able to use all of the bells and whistles of the platform, but you can get a free account, and there's actually some free assets you can download and use right away. So I really encourage you to check it out. It's such a time saver. So this is the stock design, and right away I'm thinking, okay, this pumpkin is cool, but I'm gonna need a place to put my client's logo, and that pumpkin's in the way. So what you can do is click on individual elements in designstripe, and you can either change them out with variations, or you can just turn them off. So if I don't wanna see anything here, I can come over to this panel and just click the eyeball and turn that off. Then I can go through and I can click on each object, and if I see an alternative that I like, I can click it and it automatically gets swapped out. And the artists for designstripe have done a really good job of trying to create compositions that are harmonious and choosing elements that work well together, and the default color palettes do tend to work well too. And I love the attention to detail. Every little element generally has at least 1 or 2, and in this case, there's 5 variations you can choose from. And I really like these little sparkles. There's something cool about those. For the leaves, I think these actually work really well, and there's a brown and a purple variation. I like the purple. I'm gonna leave that. And even this background shape has a few variations that you can choose from, and I think I dig this one, so let's go with that. There's also some controls over here that you might be interested in. Scene detail just lets you turn things on and off in a more intelligent way. So let me turn this hat off. I actually don't want that. And this look and feel slider affects the level of detail in the artwork. If I go all the way back to the beginning, which is called the linear style, then you see it's just line art. And sometimes that's really useful. And I can go up and get a little bit of shading, go up one more, and now we start to see some color, but it's very flat. Then we add a little more detail. And finally, we get outlines and color and detail. And this can be really handy because it'll help you keep things more consistent across different graphics. I like the original default look and feel, so I'm gonna stick with that. And then up here, you can change colors if you want to, or you can have designstripe suggest a new palette for you. You can save palettes. There's really a lot of features in designstripe that I don't use. I encourage you to explore the platform. It's really, really cool. What I like to do is get to this step and then just download the artwork in a vector format and start manipulating it. So this is a good starting point for us. How do we get this into Figma? Well, this is one of the things I love about designstripe. When you click on download, you can download this in a lot of different formats, but the format I always choose is SVG. SVG, just so you know, is a vector format like an EPS or an Illustrator file. You can scale it up as big as you want. Now, rather than downloading the SVG, I'm gonna click copy, and this is actually gonna copy this graphic to my clipboard. Then I'll hop back into Figma. And this is something Illustrator will not let you do currently, which is literally paste an SVG from a website directly into the app. So there is our artwork. It happened that quickly. Now, maybe you weren't super impressed by that, but the first time I figured out I could copy and paste from designstripe directly into Figma and immediately start working on the artwork, it kind of blew my mind because it speeds up the workflow so much. Here, I'll give you an example. Let's say we want some interesting wood texture to go on this shape, some kind of subtle tree bark-like thing. Well, let's go back to designstripe and we'll go back to the catalog. We do not need to save this because we already have it in Figma. And I'm gonna search for wood texture. And now I don't need a whole scene, I just need an object. So I'm gonna click on objects and take a look, and look at this. One of the first things that pop up is this wood surface. So let me click on this. Let's click download, copy SVG, back into Figma, and paste. That quickly. And now I have a vector wood texture that I got in a few seconds. Now you may notice that Figma is creating new frames. These are essentially artboards in Figma, and it's pasting things into those. I want everything to go into this artboard here. This is my design. So the first thing I need to do is get the background to match the background here, because I kind of like this color palette. It's a good start. So I'm gonna click on my artboard. I'm gonna hit I to bring up the eyedropper tool. This works the same as Photoshop, and just click. And now I've got the background correct. Now I just need to copy all of these elements. So I'm gonna just select them all with my mouse, Command X to cut, come into this artboard and paste. Then I'm gonna scale everything down a bit so it can fit. And I think I'm gonna end up moving these little sparkling things. So I'm actually gonna scale it so that this big blobby shape fills most of the frame. So scale it up like this, and then I will adjust, trying to get things roughly centered. And then I can click on these and I can just move them into a place and hold Option and copy them. So maybe I have a couple down here too, so that now we get a nice composition like this. And I could select these and rotate them so there's a little bit more variation between them. I think that might be kind of cool. Beautiful. And we have a nice spot here for the logo. So now I can select my logo and hold Option and copy that over here too. And I can scale this down, try to find a nice size for it in the frame. Now I want this to be right in the middle. So if I come over here and I click center horizontally, now it's right in the middle. If I want to center it vertically, I can click this button, and now that's right in the middle. And I can just move these elements around it to give it some nice negative space so it's not so crowded. And I kind of want a little more variation. This is a little too symmetrical for me. So I'm just going to kind of break these things up. I think I won't rotate these little leaves, but I might just break the frame a little bit like that, and maybe move this up just a little bit in the frame. There we go. So if I wasn't talking through all of this to get this far, it probably would have taken me, I don't know, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, a lot faster than trying to design something from scratch, grabbing stock elements one at a time, and then trying to arrange them in some way. Now, what about this wood texture? Well, what I can do is click on this. You can see that this is actually a group of layers. So if I twirl this open, I can see that a lot of these strokes here are what make up this wood texture. And then you've got this solid rectangle here. So I'm just gonna delete that. There's this extra line in there. So if I hold Command, I can just select that line and delete that. And then I can select all of these and I can copy them, move them over here. I'm gonna select the shape and hit paste. That's gonna paste that shape right above it. So here's my vector. And then here's my wood texture. Now that wood texture, I need to scale it up, and I don't want to scale up the stroke width at the same time. So I need to make sure that I'm on my move tool. That's going to let me scale up the paths without scaling up the stroke width, and that's going to maintain the nice thin stroke look that I'm digging. Now I need to mask out this wood texture with this shape. So all I need to do is make sure the shape is selected, come over here to my layer browser, hold Option and click and drag. That's going to create a copy of that shape, and then I'll select the shape and the texture, right click, and I'm gonna say use as mask. And now you can see that I've got my mask, which is the same shape as this background shape, and then I've got my wood texture. Now, I don't love the color of it. It's yellow, right? So I'd like to change the color of that. Well, that's really, really easy. All I need to do is click on that mask group. This is actually the texture. And if I double click the name of it, I could rename it something, make it a little bit easier to find. And with that selected, you can see over here the colors that it is using. It's using this color as the stroke. Well, I don't really want that. So let me click that color, click on the eyedropper, and I'm gonna first just click this background. Now, the texture's gone, but the reason I did that is because I wanna choose a color that's just a little bit darker and a little bit more saturated than that background. I want something subtle, so I think that's gonna work pretty nice. Next, I want to not see the texture where I see the logo here. So that's pretty easy. Here's my logo group, this KF black, and I think I'm gonna change the color of that too. So before I get rid of this texture, why don't I click on this fill color, click on the eyedropper, and try to find that nice dark brown. So that's a good starting point. And then I wanna pull that color even further down so it's really, really contrasty. I think that works. Now, the stroke around the type did not change. Why is that? Well, that's because that's actually a stroke. It's not a fill. So if you come over here, you can see that this is the color of the stroke. It's black. I want it to match the fill. So all I need to do is click on this hex code, hit copy, come down here and paste. And now I've matched the colors. Then I can come over here to my logo group and I can open it up and find that rectangle layer, which right now only has a stroke on it. It doesn't have a fill. I can add a fill and you can see it's the wrong color, but if I click on that color, click the eyedropper and click the background, now I have blocked out that texture and we're good to go. I can clean this up a little bit and delete these extra artboards here. So let me get rid of these. The next thing I want to do is add a little bit more depth to this design. And so to do that, I'm gonna zoom in here. I think I'm just gonna add a subtle drop shadow to everything. And I'll show you how this works in Figma. It's pretty cool. I'm gonna select this heart. I'm gonna come over here to effects and click plus. The default effect it adds is a drop shadow. So we're off to a good start. Now, what I wanna do is click on the effects settings, and I don't want this blurred at all. I want it to be a hard drop shadow, and I want the color to be pretty dark. I'm gonna grab the eyedropper and pick the same color as the logo, so it's nice and dark. Then I'm just gonna brighten it up a little bit so that the logo is still the darkest thing in the frame and draws my eye. Cool. So now I'm digging that. It's a really subtle little drop shadow. Now what I want to do is come over here to these 4 dots and click on this. This is the style menu. And so what I can do is add a style based on the effect I just created. So why don't we call this brown drop shadow? And now you can see that this heart has the brown drop shadow style on it. What's wonderful about this is if I click on any other object and come to effects and click styles, I can click brown drop shadow, and now I get that exact same drop shadow. And what's even better is if I come into the brown drop shadow and I edit it, I can edit both of these drop shadows at the same time just by changing the properties of this. If I decided I do want this to be blurry, you can see I can blur all of them at the same time. Pretty cool. Figma has a lot of really cool features like this. Again, if you're used to Illustrator, you're going to be working a lot faster in that app initially, but Figma has some features that may work even better than Illustrator for certain tasks like this one. So now I'll just quickly select all of the other objects in the scene here that I'd like to have a drop shadow, come over to effects, click on the styles and say brown drop shadow, and that part is done. Now, looking at these leaves, I feel like, the drop shadow is a little too low for those. So maybe what I want to do is click on those, come down to brown drop shadow, and click on this icon, which will detach the style. So it started with that style, but now I can actually change it. So I can change the Y separation, make it a little bit smaller, or even push it up like this. I think just having it be maybe 2 is going to work a little bit better. I still get a nice little bit of an edge to it, but it's not really weird looking like over here. Let me just do the same thing to this one. I'm going to detach, go into the settings, change this to 2, and we are good to go. And the last thing I want to do is just vary the colors up a little bit. So maybe I click on this leaf, which is actually a group, and this group is composed of a few different layers. What's cool about Figma is when you select a group, it shows you all of the colors in every layer in that group, and you can just click on them to change them. So if I want this lighter color to change, you can see I can do it and I can interactively see it. So maybe I want it to be a little bit lighter and a little bit more red. So I can just push that subtly like that. And now that I've done that, I can click on this color, which is the color of the line that's running through the leaf. And maybe I can push that, I don't know, a little bit darker, and maybe that goes a little bit more red too. And now it looks a little too dark, so I'm gonna brighten it up. And I can just play with this until I'm happy with it. and then we're good to go. I'm gonna do the same thing with these leaves. So I've got two colors. I've got the leaf color and then the vein color here. So I'm gonna select the brighter one. I'm just gonna push this a little bit more red like that. I think that'll be interesting and maybe a little bit brighter, cool. And then for the vein, maybe I just push that a little bit more red too. That's probably all that's gonna need. And then last but not least, I will adjust the pear just a little bit. I think I'll push it a little bit more green since it is a pear. I think that's appropriate. And that little shadow down there, that could also get pushed a little bit more green like that. And here's where we ended up with just a few minutes of tweaks. All I need to do now is make sure that my layers are named the way I want before I bring them into After Effects, and then bring this into After Effects. And I'm gonna show you a really cool tool that lets you do that with one click. But before I do that, I want to tell you about our design curriculum at School of Motion. You may not have a lot of experience doing design, and yet you may be asked to do design quite a bit. A lot of motion designers actually don't have a background in design, but are doing it professionally all the time and feel a little bit insecure about that. And so if that's you, I highly encourage you to check out our design classes and our illustration classes at School of Motion. They are taught by some of the best artists in the industry. They will kick your butt and teach you everything you need to know to feel confident designing professionally as a motion designer. Check those out. The link is in the description. And now I'm going to name my layers real quick and then show you how to get this into After Effects. All right, I have named all of these layers accordingly. Now it's time to get this into After Effects. So there is a tool that will do this for us, and it is called AEUX. And you can thank Mr. Adam Plouffe and our friends at Google for creating this free tool. You can download it, link in the description. It will save you so much time. So here's how it works. Once you've installed the plugin and the instructions are on the plugin website, you will find it in Development AEUX inside of Figma. And the Figma interface is really, really simple. You're gonna select the artboard or the layer or layers that you want brought into After Effects, and you're gonna click Send Selection to AE. That is it. There are some options that might be useful if you're using raster artwork or if you'd like a reference image so that you can see exactly what this looks like when composited, but I just need to click this. There is one gotcha. Inside of After Effects, you need to have a comp ready to receive those layers. And so I've created one, 1080 by 1080, 12 frames per second. Here it is. It is open. Whatever comp you have open is where the layers will land. Now, inside of After Effects, there's an AEUX panel that gets installed along with the one for Figma, and this one has a few more bells and whistles we'll talk about. You can click this button here to bring in whatever the currently selected layers are in Figma, or you can do this from Figma, which I'll show you. So I've got the artboard selected, which selects every layer, and I'm gonna click this button, and we're gonna count to 3. 1, 2, that's already done. It wasn't even 3. And here it is, look at that. Wild, done. Now, let's talk about this background. You may notice this is not the right color. Well, what's going on here is in Figma, this artboard has the background color, and artboards come through in After Effects as transparency. So what I need to do is get this artboard's background color, copy it, paste it into After Effects. So I'm gonna come over here and just click the hex color, hit Command-C to copy it, go back to After Effects. I'm gonna open up the comp settings, Command-K, and I am going to change the background color by pasting like that. And now we have rebuilt the artwork, good to go. Now, a few cool things about AEUX and how it brings in your artwork. There's an option here, I have it checked on, saying Detect Parametric Shapes. What does that do? Well, let's take a look at this logo pre-comp layer. If we come in here, you'll see that we've got the type layer, which is just a shape layer with paths on it. And then we've got the rectangle layer, which is a path that has a stroke on it. So what's cool is After Effects can recognize that this is a layer that needs a stroke, and it will apply an After Effects stroke that matches the look of the Figma one. And what's great about this is that now I can actually change these parameters in After Effects and animate them. Really handy. There's also this pre-comp group setting, which I always leave on, and you can see what it's done. It's basically taken all of the groups of shapes that were groups inside of Figma, and it makes them pre-comps inside of After Effects. So this leaf is made up of the main leaf shape and then this vein stroked shape here. And if I double click it, you'll see that I've got actually 3 shapes here. So the stem was separate, didn't realize that. Look at that. Surprise! But this is nice because that means I could maybe animate this separately if I wanted to. So that might be handy. Now, what if something came through and it's pre-comped and you don't want it pre-comped? Well, there's also this amazing feature built right into AEUX that will unpre-comp for you. So I'm just gonna click it and watch what happens. It just does exactly what it says it's gonna do. It unpre-comps it. All the layers are now in the master comp, but they haven't moved a pixel. They're in exactly the right spot. So I'm gonna hit undo and leave them pre-comped. Now, probably my favorite thing about this is that everything gets brought in as shape layers. So what that means is they are vector and they are native After Effects shape layers. If I click on the heart, double click, you'll see that this is a vector shape layer with a path in After Effects, infinite scalability. And what this also means is that there's no extra files I have to track or maintain to keep this comp live. All I need is this After Effects project. All of the artwork is self-contained, which is pretty cool. I also want to point out that the drop shadow we added in Figma has come through as well, and it comes through as a drop shadow effect, and that's also great because that means I can change the settings really, really easily. I could change the softness, I could animate this, and it's ready to go. And of course, you can still move things around and rotate things and change the composition, change the design to your heart's extent inside of After Effects. But you're starting from a much better starting place than if you were doing this the old-fashioned way. And all that's left to do is apply some finishing moves, that little bit of polish. If you'd like to know, by the way, some techniques that I use all the time, you can watch this video. We'll also link to it in the description. So here's where we ended up, just a few minutes of work. It's not gonna win any awards, all right? Let's not kid ourselves. But you saw how quickly this came together. Now, I will admit, I am not the world's best designer. I'm not even the world's 1000th best designer, but a lot of times I have to design things really, really quickly. So I rely on websites like designstripe. I rely on tools like Figma and AEUX to make my life easier, especially if you're not an amazing designer. Speed is your friend because it lets you iterate faster. And generally, the more you iterate, the better the end result ends up being. So I encourage you to try these. I find them insanely useful. You can find links to everything in the description for this video. And if you want to get even more comfortable with After Effects, with animation, check out our full motion design curriculum at schoolofmotion.com. We've got classes that you can access instantly, as well as guided sessions where you can actually work with other students in real time, do challenging exercises based on lessons, and get personalized critique on your work from a professional motion designer. Check all of that out at schoolofmotion.com, and thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned a lot, and I'll see you on the next video.